Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much to the AEOS and to the BBVA Foundation for this invitation. Today I'd like to tell you the story of the making of See Me, a global concert, which is a 24-minute musical film that I developed in the middle of the pandemic together with the music director Marin Alsop, the film director Bernadette Wegenstein, and a group of 400 artists, filmmakers, and creatives from across the world in a truly global collaboration. To be able to talk about global economic impact, which is the theme of this morning's session, Thomas alluded to this a little bit, we have to talk about the global narratives that have emerged throughout the pandemic. Because narratives are essential to our perceptions of the world, and as a result, they influence the decisions that we make. Even in the world of economics, we speak of narrative economics, a term coined by the Nobel Prize-winning economist Robert Shiller to describe how the stories people tell have an impact on economic outcomes. And this is to say that narratives are powerful and that, to an extent, all of us here in this room have a role in shaping the future through the stories we tell, as the arts are such a critical part of shaping societal narratives. And so as we all continue to grapple with the impact of COVID on the music sector, on a local scale, on a global scale, I offer up to you a very simple question. What could we do now that we could not do before? If you'll excuse me, ¿qué podemos hacer ahora que no hayamos podido hacer antes? ¿Sí? Okay. I want to tell you the story of the making of this concert, See Me, a global concert, because one, it's a story of innovation in music, of inventing a new type of experience, a global collaboration around the simple idea of bringing joy and hope to the world during the worst that we have experienced so far in the COVID pandemic. And two, because it represents the culmination of several years of efforts and dedication to drive diversity and inclusion in a conservative environment. And finally, three, because it is an example of how music has the power to shape new narratives. So to tell you this story, I have to give you a little bit of background. When my eldest daughter, Elea, was 5, that's Elea at 5, she asked me what my job was. And as she looked at me with expectant eyes, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. I wanted to impress my daughter. I was about to answer, I'm a cultural manager. No, I'm a producer. But then I paused because I knew that this would not make any sense to her, but also because I wanted to express why I do what I do. So after further hesitation and sensing her attention beginning to fade, I whispered, I bring different people to make music together so they can be kind to each other. And she answered, oh, that's nice. And she moved on swiftly to do something more interesting. And in this rather childish answer aimed at a young child lies the essence for me of what makes musical experiences so special. Over my 20 years in the arts, I've produced numerous concerts, festivals, and tours. And when I arrived at the World Economic Forum in Geneva in 2012 to run the cultural department, there was already a tradition of presenting a classical music concert on the eve of the start of the annual meeting. The thinking was that a musical experience on the night before the start of the conference could relax people, it would speak to their hearts and get them into a more collaborative mood. And so, over the years, many orchestras and conductors, soloists and singers have joined to perform on that opening night, like Valery Gergiev here and the Mariinsky, Anne-Sophie Mutter, Andrea Bocelli, and here the Cameristi della Scala with principal dancer Roberto Bolle. Now, I don't know how much you know about the World Economic Forum or Davos, so let me just say that the WEF, the World Economic Forum, is arguably one of the most influential platforms. Davos is a small resort in the eastern part of Switzerland, and it has been host to the World Economic Forum's main event, the annual meeting in Davos every January. It is the largest gathering of heads of states, of CEOs, celebrities and leaders of civil society. It is the most mediatized event in the world outside of sports, even more than the Clásico, I checked. It is heavily protected, and it gets its fair share of protests. So in this context, the opening concert tended to stay quite traditional to Western classical music, but we began to program more moments of music throughout the conference, such as here with Yo-Yo Ma throughout the conference. And we added a closing concert where we began to experiment with slightly more contemporary forms of music and hybrid musical forms, or classical music performed at a high level by people from underrepresented communities. Here is Zoe Keating, an American cellist who loops her own sound live. Here we have Harry Yeff, the British beatboxer, who explores musical collaboration with artificial intelligence. And here a quartet from the Sphinx Virtuosi, the chamber orchestra in Detroit, in the United States, an orchestra dedicated to increasing racial and ethnic diversity in classical music. And for anyone who has tried to bring more diversity in a space where the expectation is for the music to be more traditional, you will know that none of this was easy to do, and especially in a place like Davos, where there is so much pressure, so much scrutiny, and zero space for failure. But I took these creative risks because I started to realize that these moments of music could be more than a space of relaxation for the audience. That with this influential audience in the room in Davos, we could not only present new musical forms, new forms of creativity, but that on that stage we could possibly project a new normal in terms of inclusion and representation. This was an opportunity to start to shift the narrative of what is possible and who gets to be on that stage. And it was in 2017 that things took a major turn. That year in Davos, for the closing concert, we presented the Afghan Women's Orchestra. And to bring this ensemble to Davos was an impossible project. You will all know or imagine the difficulty of bringing musicians who are minor from Afghanistan into Europe. Many of them did not even have passports when we began this project, and almost none of them had ever been abroad. To make it work for Davos, in terms of visas, I had to produce a tour via Germany, and this became the first international tour of the Afghan Women's Orchestra. I wanted to bring these young, brave women to Davos to confront world leaders with a different embodiment of leadership, of courage. Here you see Zarifa Adiba and Negin Kapolwak, the first two female conductors in the history of their country. I wanted to help them spread their message of hope and help them change the narrative of their country, the narrative of their place in the world, of what an Afghan woman is capable of if given an opportunity. These brave young women of the orchestra played for their lives in front of 1,000 world leaders at the closing concert of Davos 2017. They performed a mix of traditional Western classical and traditional Afghan music. And you could hear a pin drop in the room as their demonstration of dignity, of courage, and leadership sunk in with the assembled leaders. This closing concert of Davos marked the start of the tour through Switzerland and Germany, and it became a global media phenomenon with press, radio, online, and TV segments in more than 100 major outlets around the world, 100 countries around the world. Such a phenomenon that it became the World Economic Forum's #1 media story in 2017, surpassing even the mentions of the Chinese president's first visit to Davos. This was a project that literally changed the lives of these young women. And we knew, and they knew, that this was dangerous for them, and we did not know how things would be when they returned home to Kabul. As it is, they were received home like Olympic champions, the talk of an entire nation, with many receiving scholarships to study abroad. One became the first female presenter of a TV music show, but also some were taken back by their families and away from the school, families for whom the attention had been too much in a country where many still did not agree with girls playing music. So this was not just a musical project. In a way, it was real life. And today, many of the audience members of that night in Davos, many of these leaders have been mobilized and have been helping in support of the evacuation and the resettlement of the musicians since the Taliban took the country in August. So here the leadership of the WEF was beginning to recognize that there was more to these concerts than relaxation. Now I wanted to bring more of that diversity to the opening concert, to the beginning of the conference. And in 2019, I began working with the music director, Marin Alsop, and we presented together a traditional program. But the twist was that all the musicians were women from the South Bank Centre Orchestra and the Royal Academy of Music in London. We did not advertise the concert as a women's concert. We did not feel like we needed to do so. We wanted that realization to sink in for the audience during the concert while they're appreciating how beautiful that music sounded. The following year, 2020, was the forum's 50th anniversary, and so we wanted to go big. And so Marin and I produced a concert, which was obviously also on the occasion of Beethoven's 250th anniversary. So the concert included the choir of the São Paulo Symphony Orchestra with soloists from China, Japan, South Africa, Brazil, and Italy, and the European Union Youth Orchestra. And they performed the scherzo and the finale of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, including a new rendition with a new text in Portuguese of the Ode to Joy, written by a Brazilian spoken word artist. This, on stage, was a different representation of the world. We wanted to visualize a youthful, international community based on brotherhood and friendship. We wanted to use this influential and powerful platform of the opening night in Davos to help shift the narrative around access and inclusion. I will say that not all music directors would have wanted to work with us. It took a brave and visionary soul like Marin Alsop to see past the limitations of the terrible acoustics of the space, to have the confidence to work with musicians who are still developing musically, the flexibility to adapt to a program where the audience is not in Davos primarily to listen to music, and to be okay with my request that the program should be no longer than 40 minutes. Because I learned from experience that however good the music might be, this audience left their seats after 40 minutes. Marin understood what we were trying to do, how this was different from just another concert, a concert that needed to be high quality, of course, but that the concert had a higher purpose. And so we decided that we would work again together for the third consecutive time for the opening concert of 2021. And this brings me now to See Me, a global concert. When the pandemic started, we knew immediately that we would have to think very differently for the opening concert of 2021. We discussed many options. We looked at examples of hybrid concerts with musicians playing live, virtually, but we learned quite soon that the technology did not allow for something like this to actually work well and sound good. We had watched very interesting pre-recorded collaborative rehearsals and concerts on Zoom, but we wanted to believe that there was another level, both in terms of the experience for the audience and of the creative process. And rather than seeing this new context as a problem to fix, we tried to think about what we could do now that we could not do before. This question, which was posed to us by our creative designer, Ez Devlin, what can we do now that we could not do before? That question liberated our thinking. We did not know whether there would be a physical event taking place in January 2021, so rather than wait and see, we decided in the late spring of 2020 to make an original film, a musical film that would include the musical contributions of orchestras from around the world. And this could be broadcast live, online, for the opening of Davos and for a much broader audience. And so for the first time, we could involve a much greater diversity of people in the opening concert. Marin Alsop decided on a musical program that could fulfill many needs, mixing traditional and new music, appealing to classical music fans and non-classical music fans, and representing a global set of orchestras. And to make this film an experience, not just the video documentation of a stage performance, we needed to bring different expertise, different types of people who may not have worked with each other before. We hired the film director Bernadette Wegenstein, who was already working with Marin on a documentary, even though she had never done anything like this. We also felt we needed a creative designer, and that's why we reached out to S. Devlin on the right here. S. Devlin creates the stage design for Beyoncé and U2 and others, and she too was intrigued because she had never worked on something like this. And S. Devlin suggested that we should work with a sand artist named Jim Denovan to create a monumental artwork in the sand that would represent nodes that connected people across distance, so we could reimagine visual imagery of social distancing instead as social connecting, turning the narrative of distancing on its head. And this pattern would become a visual link throughout the film. And for this sand artist, this was also very appealing, bringing his artwork into something much bigger. The director and producer hired local film teams in the locations where Marin was able to secure orchestras and choirs. The director directed from afar, speaking in different languages on Zoom to different film crews. And of course, organizing these shoots with the orchestra was very complicated, as the lockdown and the social distancing rules just kept changing and were very different in different countries. And what I didn't tell anybody was that I had not yet secured the financial sponsorship for this project. It was too early for sponsors. There was such uncertainty with COVID. Nobody wanted to commit, but I decided to live with that stress alone and not hold back the timeline of the project. And that's probably why you see the frown on my face there in the image on the top left. Thankfully, the Italian bank Intesa Sanpaolo, with whom we had built a 6-year relationship as our opening night sponsor, and they had also sponsored the Afghan Women's Orchestra, in the end, Intesa came through as a sponsor because we had built this trust over the year, and they too understood what we were trying to do and why. They were inspired by the vision and ready to take quite a massive risk with us. Despite the chaos of planning such a project in such conditions, the musicians and the film crews were so excited to participate in something so different, so uniting, so beautiful, that they actually helped us find solutions when we thought that we were running into dead ends. And through this process, what was beginning to take shape was a truly international effort, where everyone was working on their piece, knowing it was part of something bigger. In the end, we filmed with local crews in 9 locations around the world between August and November 2020. And the program of the film was in 3 parts. First, Yo-Yo Ma on a beach in the US, performing Bach Suite No. 2 in D minor for solo cello, with the overlay, this is his actual artwork, of the artist Jim Denovan making his sand art. Then we had the world premiere of See Me by the composer Rina Ismail, performed by the choir of the State Symphony Orchestra of São Paulo and the 80 boys of the Drakensberg Choir in South Africa. And then excerpts from Beethoven's Symphony No. 6 in F major, the Pastorale, performed by the Black Pearl Chamber Orchestra in Philadelphia, the Orchestra of the National Center for the Performing Arts in Beijing, the Orchestra della Toscana in Florence, the ORF Vienna Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Marin, and the Chamber Orchestra of the Afghanistan National Institute of Music, girls from the tour in Davos joined by boys. All orchestras led by women. And what we ended up with is a film that included the participation of more than 400 musicians and production team members who all got paid at a time when there was no work for anyone. A film that was watched by 200,000 people on its opening night, which has been picked up by streaming platforms like Medici TV and Marquee TV. It has been shown at several festivals and won awards, including Best Editing at the Hollywood International Diversity Film Festival and the special prize of the Firenze Film Corti Festival. But more importantly, we brought music to the world in a new way, in a way that was responding to the times, where it came to bring joy, to bring hope at one of the darkest times that people have experienced collectively across the world. Those musicians told us how they felt connected to something greater. And the film is also a manifestation of the resilience and ingenuity of artists, the evidence of the power of a singular idea, however unlikely that idea might be, and a reminder of our universal need to belong. And of course of the fact that music has extraordinary power to move consciousness. One anecdote I wanted to share before I close was that as we got closer to the final piece, with the director and editor spending literally tens of hours matching music to image, I felt that the Beethoven was too long. I was adamant that the program should be no longer than 25 minutes. I could not imagine that we could keep an online audience's attention for longer than this. So I asked to reduce the length of the Beethoven. And when I asked for that, there was silence. And then the music editor cleared his throat and said in a very serious voice, "We don't cut Beethoven." But thanks to Marion's skillful intervention, the answer changed and it became, okay, we can cut Beethoven. I wanted to share this story and the background because, again, it's a story of innovation in music, of inventing a new type of experience, turning a problem into an opportunity thanks to that question, what could we do now that we could not do before? And feeling liberated by that question to take creative risks during a period of such uncertainty. Secondly, because it represents the culmination of several years of efforts to drive inclusion and diversity in a conservative environment. This film could not have happened had we not made such efforts and built such relationships throughout the year at the WEF to slowly move to a place that was more innovative and more inclusive. And so it is a reminder that we need stamina and drive, and it takes a long time for inclusive change to happen because the narratives take shape over time. And thirdly, because it is an example of how music has the power to shape new narratives. The diversity of people who participated and who are represented in this film, the connection between them through a beautiful musical experience, that breaks with our established understanding of who this music is for, who gets to play it, and where it is supposed to be heard. And in this process, this type of music then becomes more relevant in the lives of more people. And so to close, I'd like to share with you a short excerpt of the film, the final part, where we pick up here with the finale of Beethoven's Pastorale. Oh. That's the worst possible icon, Thomas. And while we wait, I can tell you that you can see the full film at seemefilm.com or on YouTube. Very much.